How's it going, and welcome to episode 63 of On the Wire, proud member of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. Follow the pod on the Twitter at OnTheWirePod. And of course, if you're listening on a platform that allows ratings and reviews, please take a second to let us know what you think. I am Adam Howe. You can follow me on the Twitter at 80grade. That's all spelled out. And this week, I am missing my regular co-host, Kevin Hasting, as he made his long and arduous journey back to the big island of Hawaii. Kevin will be back next week and can still be followed on the Twitter at HastingKevin as he's enjoying his 8 a.m. baseball games, which I'm very jealous about. I'm fortunate to have Jake Maish filling his chair today. Jake is a regular contributor over at pitcherlist.com and will be pulling double duty on the FAAB front as he not only fills in for Kevin here, but also taking over his companion FAAB recommendation article over at Pitcher List as well. So follow Jake on the Twitter at Jake Maish. You can find a link to that in the show description as well. Jake, thanks, man, for joining pulling that double duty, man, pulling in that the regular article that Kevin puts out and now filling his shoes on air. Thanks for doing that, man. And how's the fantasy season treating you this year?
Good. I'm happy to be here. So thanks for letting me take over and do this with you guys. We're definitely looking forward to it. We're going to have a ton of fun. But as far as the season goes, it's going to go a lot better once Vinny Pasquantino finally gets called up. So I check breakfast every day. And it's the same old thing. He has not been called up today. When we get there, I think I'll finally let myself feel some joy. But other than that, it's been all right. I really dove into the more competitive leagues in this offseason and doing more leagues than I've ever have before this year. And it's been awesome. It's been awesome. Yeah, thanks again for having me on.
Yeah, you are my indirect competitor in the Earth Leagues as well, as you are one of the founding members of the WARF. You want to remind everybody what WARF stands for and where it's based out of?
Oh, I'll be happy to. That is the Waffle House Area Rotisserie Fantasy League in the Atlanta area, loosely. I'm actually in Cincinnati right now. I drove to Atlanta, so I was in Atlanta for the draft. But yeah, so Waffle House area, yeah, I think it's the best name in the Earth League and one of the best leagues too.
It's pretty good. It's a pretty good name. When I saw that come through as they were announcing all the extra leagues that were joining this year, that was by far one of my favorite ones. So well done for you guys for putting that together. Just because we have Jake here filling in for Kevin doesn't mean we don't need a bit more help navigating the FAAB landscape for this week. So luckily, we have a very special guest joining along with us, and that is Jason Collette. Jason can be found regularly contributing at RotoWire with his regular Collette Calls article, and of course, a regular co-host on the Sleeper and the Bus podcast. You may have heard of it, may not, but if you haven't, go check it out. It's been on for a while. I think you guys passed the 1100 episode mark soon, so it's pretty good. You have some longevity there. You can follow Jason on the Twitter at Jason Collette and check out the episode description for links of his other work there as well. Jason, thanks so much for joining us, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. When you guys were talking about the WARF League, that's the one I couldn't go is the problem. I had an invite, could not make it. It was the one weekend that did not work for me. So, yeah, couldn't do that. But maybe one of these years I'll be able to get into something. But, yeah, we'll see. I can't believe the Sleeper in the Bus is like 1,100. I remember when Paul and I did episode 1. I think it was 2011. So it was, I think at that time we called it the Towers of Power Fantasy Hour. Yep. Yeah. So then it's morphed along, and these days I do Sundays. So this will be good prep for me because tomorrow Justin and I are talking about FAAB stuff as well. So this will be perfect. I'm going to have a Sunday. We record Sundays at noon, and I'm going to experience all this deja vu and be like, wait a second, didn't I just talk about this? Yeah, I did. So yeah, this is good.
Good reference point. There you go. All right, let's get right into it then. We'll give Jason as much info as possible for the Sunday episode of Sleeper in the Bus. But Jake, I'm going to start with you in our news and notes section. As typically we will do here, we are going to go over a couple of interesting things that might have happened throughout the course of the week to prep you for what you might be considering for FAAB. So if we don't hit on everything, which we will not, it's typically because it probably doesn't affect that much of your consideration for FAAB. Jake, I'm going to start with you. Max Muncy did return from his IL stint in LA on Thursday. He slotted right back into the cleanup spot for the Dodgers order. Assuming Muncy returns to his everyday role as time moves on, who are you seeing as the one that's going to lose the most playing time in Los Angeles due to his return?
Yeah, so now that their core original starting 9 is healthy, it pushes those guys that have been filling into the peripheral. It's like Zach McKinstry, Hanser Alberto, Eddie Alvarez. None of those guys were super relevant in fantasy as they were filling in, and McKinstry was the one that got sent down when when Muncy came up. But I think once Edwin Rios comes back from the IL, it might get a little complicated. But the thing is that Rios was like forcing his way into a regular starting role. There was like a stretch in early May, and then he had an injury that didn't require him to go on the IL. Sorry, it was late May, and then early June up until that injury. And even before Muncy went on the IL, he was getting regular playing time, and that didn't really push any one of those 9 core guys out. What it did, it was created extra off days for almost like a cycle. Like I went back and looked, and in those periods where Rios was getting regular time and they had all 9 others healthy, you saw like Chris Taylor get a day off and Gavin Lux get a day off here and there. And Bellinger sat one day, but none of them sat out more than 2 games, maybe 3. So with the Dodgers, they have that positional versatility, which is so important, that they can move guys around. They can get off days here and there and keep their guys fresh. So it's not that any of those guys are going to be like sittable, because they're not going to have playing time. Anyone in that lineup needs to be played. But I think once Rios gets back, that could be a situation where you see like maybe 1 game less a week for Chris Taylor, Gavin Lux, even Justin Turner. But for right now, it's kind of just pushing those peripheral guys to the bench, and you'll get to see those 9 core guys for the Dodgers really go at it.
Yeah, I think that's something to consider in those weeks. Like you said, Rios is still on the IL, and any other guys aren't really forcing the issue. When the Dodgers have those 5-game work weeks, when they already have only 2 games in the first half of a week, like an NFBC format, maybe these are extra consideration for maybe sitting your Gavin Luxes if you have that flexibility on your roster and stuff like that, because they might even get an extra day off and only get that 1 game or even 2 games during that portion of the week. All right, Jason, we're going to start our little catcher run here with you. And the Toronto Blue Jays have called up catcher Gabriel Moreno from AAA. On Saturday, of course, this is after Danny Jansen hit the IL with a fractured pinky finger earlier in the week, when they called up Zach Collins for about 2 days, and then they sent him right back to AAA as well, with Moreno being called up. So question, though, is about Moreno. Can we see Moreno making an immediate fantasy impact, especially with Collins now gone, making more room for Moreno behind the plate?
Yeah, I don't know about immediate. The thing, he may have more of an immediate impact defensively. We saw that in the game today. There was, I forgot who tweeted it, but they talked about Moreno's pop time was recorded as low as 1.7 in the minor. And to put that in context, Real Muto leads the majors at 1.88. So if Moreno can throw a 1.7, that's a dart. And he got, I think, Derek Hill, because Derek Hill slid off the bag. I want to say Moreno was 18 of 33 controlling the runners. And so either it's perhaps footwork consistency or the pitchers are just that slow to home plate in Buffalo for them. But 1.7 is absurd. And so the problem, with catcher is it's such a high bar. And I would say like a guy with offensive upside, like MJ Melendez. It's only been recently that Melendez has started hitting. But when he first came up, he really struggled. It takes some time. We're still all the talk about, hey, Adley Rutschman's up. Adley Rutschman's not hitting. Joey Bart's not hitting. But the best hitting rookie catchers have been Melendez and Sam Huff. Sam Huff's got his own challenges, which we'll talk about later. But that, to me, I don't see an immediate impact. But I do see him with that arm. It could be behind the plate most of the time. Kirk has definitely taken some steps forward defensively this year, better framing and whatnot. And that's been the thing with Jansen around his injuries, has not been that great behind the dish. He's been awesome at it. It just hasn't been that great behind it. And this is now his 2nd injury, and he's going to miss another spell of time, which sucks. I have him in multiple leagues. And the replacement level is not looking good. I think I already had to pick up Luke Maile in one. That was my replacement. So that's kind of where I am with Moreno. Excited to see him play at the major league level. But again, look at Rutschman, best catching prospect in baseball. And he's certainly hitting like a catcher so far.
So we got one question on Twitter. I'll let you clarify this really quickly because you gave a really quick answer on Twitter as well. So you said you got Danny Jansen in a league or 2 as well. Are you dropping Danny Jansen due to this second IL stint?
I am, because he's probably going to be at a minimum of 4 weeks. I just can't carry an injured catcher on a 7-man bench. As much as I'd love Danny Jansen, it was tough to carry him the first injury, and I don't want to put myself through that again. Maybe it's because I also have multiple guys hurt on a lot of my rosters right now, and it's just really tough to. It's just tough to carry those dudes, and Hopefully that gets better. It just doesn't seem every time I turn around and open up the RotoWire player news, it's, oh, hey, look, one of my other players has got a flag next to it. Fantastic. Corey Knebel, come on down. You're the next guy.
There you go. Like I said, we got a couple of catchers to talk about here. So, Jake, I'm going to go to Cincinnati with you and Tyler Stevenson. A little bit bad news here as Jason talks about more people going on the injured list. He has a fractured thumb of his own. He should miss probably about 4 to 6 weeks, as it's been reported. Can we expect any replacement production from any other catcher in Cincinnati roster while he's out, do you think?
The short answer is no. Not even in Great American Ballpark, which has been one of the best offensive ballparks. You would really hope that someone could step up there, but I don't know. I went and took a look at Aramis Garcia, who's going to fill in that starting role now, and he's been pretty bad this year. 69 plate appearances, 1 homer, 1 RBI, 5 runs, hitting 164 with a couple walks. And even if you're thinking, oh, that's with a regular playing time, he might be able, is there any potential there if he plays every day? His max exit velocity is 106.4. His career high is 106.9. He doesn't even have a good plate discipline. His 27.5% K rate, 2.9% walk rate. He does hit a good amount of fly balls, but his exit velocity on those fly balls is 83.7, which is really bad. League average is 87.4. So I just can't get excited about anything there with him, which is disappointing because that ballpark is incredible. You'd like to have one of their starting guys if possible, but he's just not showing much. Even his home splits are worse than his road splits somehow. So, yeah. And then he just called up Chris Oakey. I believe I'm guessing that's how you pronounce it. But in 1,300 minor league plate appearances, he has a 617 OPS. This year at AAA, he does have a 766 OPS, hitting 265. It's only at 74 plate appearances. There's a much larger sample that says he's not that good. So if he shows us something, if there's something in his batted ball data, if there's something in his plate discipline early on, maybe take a look at him. He's getting playing time, but I think in general, those catchers aren't going to bring you too much.
Yeah, I'm assuming that anybody who rosters Stevenson, and myself included in many places, is going to be looking outside of Cincinnati, probably even forcing themselves to pay up for Moreno, even if Jason's right and he ends up struggling to start with. I know I've got Adley a couple places, so I definitely noticed the early season, the early struggles out of him, as Jason alluded to.
Yeah, I have Stevenson in one league, and it's Draft Champions. And I had Cal Raleigh on the bench, so that's the replacement.
That's happening.
It's Cal Raleigh.
Yeah.
So it's now Gary Sanchez and Cal Raleigh, and I'm still fingers crossed that at some point Matt Thace from the Angels gets called up because he's my 4th catcher. That's it.
All right.
Yep. Well, Thace doesn't even have catching eligibility yet, though, does he?
I think I drafted him as a catcher.
Well, I'm pretty sure I drafted him as in the 48th round in a couple of DCs, and I did it as the secret catcher. And Huff didn't have catching eligibility either to start. And so
and I don't understand why Huff didn't, because Huff played catcher in 2020, didn't play in the majors last year. That's weird why Huff didn't have that catcher eligibility. I'm befuddled by that.
Yeah, luckily Texas is giving him that chance that you mentioned earlier and gain that eligibility back for next year as well if he sticks back there long enough. Like I said, let's stick with catchers. Jason, I'll give you one more, and I'll go home for you in Tampa Bay, where your favorite, Mike Zunino, has the IL with shoulder inflammation. No broken fingers on this one, just the shoulder inflammation. No big deal. And in his place, the Rays moved Rene Pinto from the taxi squad to the active roster. Is there any short-term or long-term value for Pinto with Zunino out, or should any and all attention just be on Francisco Mejia taking the bulk of the playing time behind the plate?
Yeah, it's on Mejia. I would see this as the problem is, even last year when you looked at what Zunino was able to do, it was because Mejia was able to help keep Zunino fresh. But Mejia is not a 5-game-a-week catcher, but he may have to be now because Pinto should not catch multiple games in a week. It's like he reminds me of Rene Rivera in Tampa Bay lore, or Jose Molina. It's just like he can take one every now and then. He's had some numbers down in Durham, but Durham's a sweet hitting park. I was just there this time last week, and it's got that really nice wall in left field. If you can hit a fly ball, you can get it out of there. So that's part of the issue. But he is probably going to be catching 5 days a week now. Defensively, he's got some inconsistencies. He's got a good arm. He's got one of the better pop times back behind catcher, but the Rays as a whole have not, they're below league average in controlling the running game. And some of that's on the pitchers because it throws well. Mejia throws well, but some of the pitchers take their sweet time coming home. And so they are, I want to say they have permitted 80% of the stolen bases to be successful, and the league average is 75. So they're slightly below league average in that regard.
Yeah, I assume that Mejia would get the bulk there, whether or not you want him to or not. As a fan, that's beside the point. That's not what we're talking about here. Keep an eye. If you got Mejia rostered, especially if he's like that third catcher option that you drafted in a DC, you might want to consider throwing him in to your starting two.
That Zunino injury really killed me because the one league I have him in, he's my backup to Tyler Stevenson and Yasmani Grandal in a two-catcher FBC 50. And so I plugged in Zunino. He got injured. And the only guy I have behind him is Tom Murphy, who was also injured. So I just don't have a second catcher in that one. So we'll see how quickly I fall from.
It may not be a bad thing, though. Sometimes it's like having no at-bats out of your second catcher is better than having multiple from them.
That's fair. I was really scared when it was Zunino and Grandal looking at it. I was like, oh, man, I don't even know if this is going to, like, hold up for a minute. Like, I could just see that batting average absolutely tank.
The Grandal thing is killing me. It really, he should be so much better than this. He showed so much good progress last year, and then whatever it is this year, I don't know. I blame Tony La Russa anyhow.
That's fair. That's a fair statement to make in most cases. So you're fine with that. All right, we'll move off of catcher here, but we'll stay with Tony La Russa. So well done on the segue there for me, Jason. Gavin Sheets was sent packing to AAA. Replacing him on the roster was a pitcher, Jimmy Lambert, coming back into the bullpen. And so unless we see another move soon, that should leave Tony La Russa with 3 bench pieces for his lineup. So, Jake, who do you see soaking up any extra at-bats for the White Sox until they add another bat back on the roster?
Tony, my man, if you're listening, please.
Of course he is.
For the love of the game, of the baseball gods, please let it be Andrew Vaughn. Please just let him play. Like, seeing the lineups that had like Sheets at DH or right field with Vaughn on the bench against a righty killed me. Absolutely. As a White Sox fan, that's just been demoralizing. So just like, please let Vaughn play him every day, 2 or 3 hole, let him eat. And just, he's only 24 right now, I think. Like, he's still got plenty of time to grow into his own. And they need that bat in the middle of the lineup with Moncada not hitting, with Jimenez out, with Tim Anderson out. Like, just let him play, please. So that's my appeal to Tony if he's out there. But yeah, Vaughn is legit. Like, he's hitting 288 this year, 813 OPS, 92.2 zone contact percentage, which is elite. So there's no doubt about it. Like, the kid can hit. He's not taking as many walks this year as before, but like I said, he's still young and he still has solid plate discipline with the strikeouts. And so the ceiling's, I don't even know. It's pretty high for him. So just let him play. And his competition is Lurie Garcia and Adam Engel. So they should be the last people taking at bats from him. Although Tony loves to hit Lurie first. So you never know.
Yeah, I'm a big Vaughn supporter, and I'd like to see that happen. It seems as though the new fan favorite right now would be Jake Berger, as he's taken up a good chunk of the DH spots in the last week or so as well. He's been put into the DH about 4 times in the last 8 games for the White Sox, now hitting in the middle of that lineup as well. And he's on a nice little 6-game hitting streak, kind of crushing the ball lately. So I'm expecting to see him get a little bit extra playing time there, as well as Sheets was primarily just being the DH when he was playing as well.
It's disappointing to see what Sheets has been this year. Here in Charlotte, I see him, the AAA team is here. So I've seen him quite a bit. I've seen Jake Berger quite a bit too. And Sheets can really handle AAA pitching quite well, but he has not shown the ability to do much at the major league level. It's been frustrating. I'm trying to figure out, like, how Josh Harrison's still on this team. If they call somebody else up, I would assume it's Adam Hazley who can play around, and he's got 11 stolen bases down here in Charlotte. But that's kind of it until these other guys get back. There's not much else. Romy Gonzalez has not done much of anything. I thought he may have a role this year, but he hasn't been able to do much down here. So if anybody comes up, it'll be Adam Hazley. I just don't see another option for them right now.
All right, Jason, I'm going to go back to Tampa Bay for you, of course. Is one of the better bullpen pieces there. Andrew Kittredge just had to get Tommy John surgery, if he hasn't already had it by the time we record this. Can we confidently speculate on any other bullpen piece for Tampa Bay at this point, at least in the short term?
Colin Poche was getting the work when Kittredge was on the IL the first time. And the weird thing was, they're like, oh, he's going to be on the IL, this Kittredge. He's going to be on the IL with loose bodies in his elbow. I'm guessing whatever that sleeve, remember, he was supposed to have, there was good fear he was going to have Tommy John back in 2020 or 2019. And they were able to avoid it. Like maybe the sleeve, whatever it was, is what finally gave way. But they've had multiple guys pitching well. Right now, I would say the hot hand would be Poche. Fireeisen's on the IL right now, but he was pitching extremely well. Jason Adam got the save the other day. But I would say for now, it's going to be Poche as the primary guy. They already have multiple dudes with saves this year. Every year, they've got 7 guys with saves already. 7. And they've had 10 plus in the last 3 years. And so Kittredge currently leads the team with 5, and then Brooks Raley with 3, Poche with 3, Thompson with 3, Adams with 2, Fireeisen and Whistler 1. I don't see anybody else coming up and stealing a save out of that mess. We'll see where it goes. It's like you run the risk like this week. They're going to New York, and it's a make or break series this early in the season. Poche certainly has had his issue with home runs, and do you want him getting that ball and pitching in New York with I think they have 17 home runs tonight in New York, or take 10, but yeah, they have at least 6. Do you want him, or do they try something else? I don't know. It's going to be it's going to be a committee. But it always was. That was always going to be the case. It was never going to be a full-time guy.
Yeah, non-zero chance that Kittredge still leads the team in saves by the end of the year. Based on all that, even with only having 5. All right, Jake, as you pointed out to me earlier in the week, Taylor Ward is expected back for the Angels on Tuesday. Joe Madden, when he was in charge, mentioned that Joe Adell was only called up to the Angels due to Ward's injury. And lo and behold, Adell sent back to AAA on Saturday, a couple days even before Ward is set to come back from his IL stint. Do you expect Adell to be enough of a fantasy value in redraft league the rest of this season at this point to hold, or is he an easy drop and you're not really worried about what he could possibly do if he gets called back up later on in the season?
I feel like you probably should drop him. It's not an easy drop by any means, because when you look at just like the raw athletic ability there, it's always been off the charts. And so every time you have to pick him up and drop him again, it just hurts. It hurts. But if you look at the 6-game stint that he just had up, he went 7 for 19, run 2 RBIs, didn't steal the base or hit a home run. But I think the big thing that stood out to me was that he had a 9.5% walk rate, which, I mean, super small sample size. But like in the the whole rest of the season before, in his first time up, he had 1 walk. So just he's showing a little bit better plate discipline. In the minors, he walked a lot more, but that strikeout rate was still astronomical. He's still at 28.6% strikeout rate. So that's always been the thing, is his approach and plate discipline, the strikeout and walks. And so he's showing a little bit of improvement in the walks, and even the strikeout rate is lower than it was before, but still pretty high. He's going to have to figure that out at some point. He's still young, but I think for the rest of the season, for redraft, it's just something that I don't think you could stomach. Unless you have a huge bench and you can afford to stash him, maybe in a deep league, then sure. But yeah, it's going to be tough. And it's just wild to me that the Angels chose Juan Lagares to have that weak side platoon with Brandon Marsh over him. I don't understand it. The last time Juan Lagares had an above average WOBA for a season was in 2018, when he only had 64 plate appearances. I don't know why you go with him over your young guy that you want, like, to get that
major league experience, right?
Exactly. Like, how is he going to work? He's shown that he could hit AAA. Like, you see the highlights every time he hits a bomb in AAA, and you're like, oh, what else can he do? He's working on those strikeouts and walks. But man, I'd rather him do it at that major league level, because just the standard of pitching is different. If you make strides down there, you're going to come up and kind of have to start over again.
I will say the overlap of Adell coming up and the Angels' 14-game losing streak they were pretty spot on. Well, that's all I'm going to say. I'm sure they have nothing to do with each other. I'm going to stay in LA, or at least the LA region, Jason, and go over to the Dodgers, where Walker Buehler left Friday's game early with elbow discomfort. Everybody loves to hear that. Assuming he's missing any amount of time, and he is set to go on the IL at least for the short term, how do you expect the Dodgers to fill that rotation piece?
Andrew Heaney's due back within a week. So Heaney's on his rehab. I would assume that's going to be Heaney. I mean, Kershaw came back today. He's pitching as we're recording. or he may be out of the game now already. I don't know. But Heaney is on his way back by Sunday. As somebody who was all in on Heaney before the season and was loving how he was pitching before he went out on the IL, I'm excited about that. As somebody who went pocket aces in DC with Brandon Woodruff and Walker Buehler, not loving that. But I have Heaney in that league, so at least I have a natural replacement. So that's how I would expect them to go. I would also expect them to use some of that aforementioned depth we were talking about earlier in the earlier Dodger segment to go out and find something. This isn't what they were hoping for. They're going to want to add. And they can go get pieces. They can go right up the interstate and talk to the A's about Montas if they want to. They can probably go get Luis Castillo if they wanted to. We've seen them before. If they want to go out and get what they want, they do. So I don't think the full-time answer is in-house, but the current answer is Andrew Heaney as long as he can stay healthy.
Yeah, even if Heaney takes a little bit longer than we expect, like you said, later on next week, filling in that spot with, the Dodgeritis with the bullpen game here or there would not be out of the question. But who do you go after there for that vulture win is, anybody's guess in most cases. So we might talk a little bit about that a little bit later. All right, we will go up the interstate, but we'll go to San Francisco, Jake. Jacob Junis left the most recent start after slipping and ultimately was diagnosed with a hamstring strain. And it seems unlikely he'll make his next start. And with Alex Cobb still on the IL himself, is there anyone else in San Francisco you'd be looking to take advantage of their scheduled matchups against Kansas City and Pittsburgh next week in that rotation?
Yeah, I think as far as who's going to take Junis' spot, I think it's most likely going to be a bullpen game. The only pitcher on their current roster that's ever started a game not as an opener was Harlan Garcia, who started 6 games in 2018. And then I guess Jose Alvarez started 6 games in 2013 as well. But who cares? There's really no one that has that recent experience as a starter. All of them have been openers, so I only assume that they're going to keep doing that. Even when you look at AAA, their best starter right now is Reynel Espinal, who has a 4.2 ERA, 1.36 whip. In 9 starts. He does have a 12.2% strikeout rate, so you never know. But I don't think that they'll be calling him up to do that. I think they're just going to run with the bullpen. And as far as who could vulture that win, it's a crapshoot. All those guys are used very similarly, those middle relievers. Your 2 best options are probably Brebbia or Leon, but it's probably not worth it to go fishing unless you are absolutely desperate in the deepest of leagues.
Yeah, getting lucky with those picks is not for the faint of heart unless you're really paying attention to usage. And even with Gabe Kapler at the helm, you don't necessarily know who's going to come in depending on who's in the lineup, what part of the lineup's coming up, et cetera, et cetera. Good insight there. Maybe not something to worry about too much as far as when it comes to FAAB this week. Last bit of information here, Jason, and that is some good news. Dylan Carlson returned from the IL. I always like talking about guys who are coming back from the IL, less so than guys going on the IL, of course. Mm-hmm. But it sends Lars Nootbaar back to the AAA to make room. My question is, which version of Carlson do you expect to see in the lineup for the next few weeks? The one that started the season slashing 175, 227, 238 with 0 home runs through his first 88 plate appearances, which is basically through April, or the version that saw him slashing 333, 371, 515 with 2 home runs over his 77 plate appearances prior to hitting the IL in late May, which was basically the 3 weeks prior to that.
It's a long-term investment with him. I would look at it like Teoscar Hernandez. Hernandez was doing well, went on the IL. When he came back, really struggled to get back into the swing of things, and he's showing signs of life now. It's what I would expect from Carlson. We know he's immensely talented, but for him to basically have to restart the season the way he has, I would expect some struggles early on, but I'm willing to ride that out in the short term to get the long-term play out of him. So that's where my thoughts are on him. I was really high on him last year, and even again coming into the season. Obviously, not getting the results that we expected, but these injuries, it just takes some time for these guys to get back in. Rarely do guys hit the ground running coming off these injuries. So if you can wait out a week, 10 days, depending on how your offense is, if you're already hurting, it's going to be tough to carry this out. But if you've got a pretty decent offense and you can afford to take the early hit for the long run.
Yeah, he started in right field, moved to center field today in Saturday's game, batting 7th in the order. Got a hit, 1 for 3, and that game is over now. That'll be his night, and so it'd be nice if they don't force him into that leadoff spot like they were for a while and let him get acclimated and, like you said, just get back from that injury and not put so much pressure on him. All right, what's going to wrap us up for our news and notes section of this episode? As always, I'm sure we missed a bunch of things worth noting, but to keep up with all the news of the day, make sure you're listening to the First Pitch podcast with Chad Young and Scott Chu, who breaks down the news, highlights, and observations from every day's worth of games, as well as looking ahead at each slate to keep you up to date with everything you need to know to win your fantasy league. In just a moment, we're going to talk to Jason Collette about some trends he's been watching through the first couple months of the season. Before we do that, we're going to take this quick break.
Hey, Alex Fast here, and thanks for listening to this podcast on the Pitcher List Podcast Network. If you're a fan, consider supporting all of us by getting a PL Plus subscription, where you're going to get an ad-free website and get access to our Discord, where you can talk to all of our podcast hosts and staff. Plus, you can hang out with our incredible Pitcher List community. It's basically a baseball sanctuary year-round for as low as $8 a month. You can sign up at pitcherlist.com/plus, and you're going to get your first month free with promo code podcast. Also, don't forget to check out everything else we do as well, from YouTube videos, live streams, newsletters, off-season articles, TikToks, breakdowns, over 15 baseball podcasts on our network. We can't stop talking about baseball even during the off-season. So sign up for PL Plus today at pitcherlist.com/plus and use promo code podcast to get your first month free. All right. Thanks for listening. Let's get back to the show.
All right, and we are back. Of course, you're listening to On the Wire. I am Adam Howe, joined today by Jake Maish and Jason Collette. And we're going to talk to Jason real quick about some trends that Jason, I just wanted to pick your brain about some trends that you've been tweeting about, you've been writing articles about. As we joked about before we recorded, yes, people pay attention to your articles, believe it or not. But for those who maybe haven't gone in depth into your one of your latest articles, where you talk about especially some run trends and some contact trends that you've been noticing, and then earlier in the season you're tweeting out things about stolen base trends, about who's running, who's not running, who you alluded to earlier, who's throwing out runners and who's not. Are there any specific trends that you've noticed so far this season that kind of stand out as being different and actionable than in previous seasons?
Yeah, we knew early on. I usually write the same article every year because it does not take long for the baseball to reveal itself. Usually it's about 10 days into the season and we know what it's going to be. And so I was talking about this early on this season. This is the new baseball and it's not going anywhere. Then Baseball Pal put a tweet out the other day, and that's what started that article. About the middle of May, the baseball all of a sudden started doing things like we were accustomed to. And it was like, oh, okay, hey, look, something's changed. Now, baseball is not very transparent. They're as transparent with what they do with the baseball as they are with evaluating umpires. But you can see in the week-by-week splits, there has been a noticeable upward trend in offense, which, thank God, because the first month of the season was really tough to watch. And it wasn't just, hey, it's warming up, because it's taken a while to warm up. I live in North Carolina. We're gonna hit 100 this week. But it's been in the 80s. It's been great here until this coming week is going to stink. We're seeing these upward trends, but overall it hasn't been there. So that was one of the things, was the baseball has seemingly changed, and so we're starting to see more offense over the past couple of weeks. And you look at the week-by-week splits, and everything's going up. I think when I got on XM this morning, they needed 90 home runs over this weekend on Saturday and Sunday to match last week's home run total. I think the Yankees are trying to get there tonight on their own with stuff. So it's happening with that. And so if you've enjoyed pitching today, Martin Perez has been pretty much unhittable this year. Now, all the supporting stats scream this is not going to last. And today he tried to make it all up at once. 12 hits and 3 walks in 4 innings, 8 runs. That's the Martin Perez we've all known and loathed. And it came up today. So if you've had these types of pitchers that have been just enjoying some surprising, taking advantage of the mush ball, and just because to me it felt like a bunch of lefties. Hey, if you're a control lefty and can put the baseball on the out part of the plate and just dare guys to try to go to the opposite field with it. Because Saris wrote an article at The Athletic talking about the hitters that traditionally hit opposite field home runs are struggling to do so this year. So if you're a control lefty, you can do that, then by all means, just sit out there and live out there and dare somebody to try to take it the opposite way, or they'll pull it and hit it into the defense with that. And I think watch how Nestor Cortez has been able to pitch this year. That's certainly helping him. Jordan Montgomery, he's going to get a win tonight because he's getting run support. And that's amazing for those of us who have Jordan Montgomery and have watched him put up 7 quality starts and get 2 damn wins out of it. I said damn on Pitcher List podcast. Sorry, Nick. Anyhow, those are some of the trends. But the other piece of it is strikeout. The league's making more contact. And that's flown under the radar where you look at, in the article I looked at by week 2021 versus 2022, and the league's making more contact this year. That's a good thing because strikeouts were out of control. And if we can get the league making more contact, that was great. And then we're seeing more stolen bases. And the frustrating thing for me, though, was that at the peak, right before the baseball seemingly changed, the league was going crazy, like still 151 bases in week 6 of the season. And that's the highest we've had in a long time. And it's like, oh, maybe we're going to get stolen bases. And then the ball started flying again, and teams are like, we're not going to run as much. But we're still seeing more steals this year than we were last year. So teams are still trying to manufacture offense. If your team can't hit home runs, like the disparity between home runs, the Yankees are now over 90 home runs, and poor Tigers have 30 as a team. So it's and the A's have 37. So some teams are trying to run to manufacture their runs, but strikeouts are down, stolen bases are up. The home runs appear to be heading in a normal direction. We're not going to see the return of the happy fun ball, but we're also not going to see, as Joe Sheehan has called it repeatedly, Premier League scoring, where it's 3-0. 1-0, 2-1, and all these box scores were going crazy early the first month of the season. It was tough to watch it, and I love baseball, but man, I don't like to see two also ran pitchers having a pitching duel because it was the baseball. And so that's really the trends that I've been watching, and we'll see how it plays out over the summer.
Yeah, I've been watching a lot of stolen bases throughout the course of the season, so I noticed that spike that you're talking about earlier, and it was fun just watching the tracker, the stolen base tracker come through in the Pitcher List Discord, and it was just like stolen base, and then all of a sudden a home run, and then stolen base, and then another home run, and then all of a sudden, like you said, it just kind of flipped all of a sudden. And it's interesting to think about, how do you even plan for that? Like you really don't, especially with that transparency of the ball not known or not existing. Can you really bulk up on stolen bases early in the season, knowing that they're going to go away, or at least they're going to start going down as teams start realizing, we can't hit home runs again. We're going to stop running, and it's not going to be part of our game as much in the summertime for whatever reason. May it be the ball, may it be the weather, may it just be adjustments that hitting coaches are making, what have you.
And stolen bases do tend to wane, though. As we get on, a lot of guys, the stolen bases happen in the first half of the season. Then we get towards the back half of the season, and everybody's got tired legs, and nobody's running as much, unless you're a rookie getting promoted, and you're like, oh, I'm going to run, or you're Alberto Mondesi, RIP. Because September's been great. If you've got you go get Mondesi and you enjoy 12 to 15 steals, and you're like, okay, I saved my season with him. But that's not happening this year, so who knows where they're going to come from.
And then on the pitching side, I've heard you talk in the past, especially with after the shortened season and going into 2021, the value that you put into middle relievers, and probably you weren't going to put that kind of value into the 2022 season for those middle relievers expecting starting pitchers. Have you been tracking that? Have you noticed that to be the case, or is that value, do you think, is still there?
Yeah, early on, there were a lot of reliever wins out there because when teams had the bigger rosters, and I forget exactly, have they shortened it yet? I know they keep extending it, but it feels like it hasn't been as bad. I know that Adam Simber has 6 wins of like 22 innings of work, and that's been fun. If you've had Adam Simber with that, I think he's got 6 wins and 3 saves and 22 innings of work. It's been fantastic for that regard, where he almost has, I think an AL only's got $10 of value. It's pretty insane. So I haven't seen as much of it there. I did not expect because last year I went into it coming off the short season, coming up the short 2020, going into 21. I targeted those types of pitchers, multiple inning relievers. I wanted those types of guys because I didn't expect a lot of guys to go out and try to resume normal workloads. And so that overall had a very successful fantasy year last year doing that. This year, as you said, I came into it not looking for those types of guys, but I wanted to have volume for the amount of pitching options that I had with that, so I could cycle guys in and out and try to do that. And especially I did multiple DCs, and I think I had 27 and 23 splits on all of them just so I had enough pitchers. And even then it wasn't enough. I was looking at one earlier, man, the amount of red that's on my bench is awful. And I have no options. And so I tried to do it that way. I've been surprised. It's not showing up now. It's like much was been made until the Twins started beating up on the Yankees pitching, like how deep the Yankees pitchers were going into games, and they wanted to do that. And that's all fine and dandy to talk about in June. How's that going to carry over the course of a season for multiple guys that have never worked that deep into a season? And you got to keep these guys fresh for October and such. With Cortez, with Jordan Montgomery, Tyone, it's like how – Garrett Cole, fine. If he wants to go out and throw 7 every time, go for it. So that's going to hit. And that's close to home with me. Drew Rasmussen and Jeff Springs, both guys working out of the bullpen last year. Now they're working as starters and going 5-7 innings. That can't last all year. And so that's going to fade down. And so you could see those guys getting pulled a little bit earlier. Maybe they go to a 6-man rotation once Luis Patino comes back. Yanni Chirinos possibly comes back at some point. They got Pete Fairbanks, so they're going to do their bullpen thing, and they may go to a 6-man rotation. But some of these guys that have not had the history of that workload, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. So if you're looking at your roster going, hey, look, I've got these guys in there rolling. That's all nice now, but you got to start getting ahead of that game. Shane Boswell, he came back and pitched today and didn't do well. First outing, it is what it is, but he missed all that time, and so that helps control his workload for things. So we'll have to see where all this goes with stuff, but you can never have enough pitching, and eventually I really want to see what happens league-wide as we get deeper into the season with some of these guys that have never worked big workloads. All of a sudden they have to do that, because let's be real, there's a lot that's already being decided in baseball. How are these teams going to play in August and September if they have double-digit leads? What's going to happen? And we don't get the roster expansion that we do in September. So then it's like, all right, if I'm the Yankees and I have a 14-game lead, okay, fine. You come out here and pitch 4 or 5 innings, you're out. Now we're going to give it out to the bullpen and let these guys work through it. But, yeah, there's by the time we get to September, there's not going to be much left to be decided in baseball. It's just you look at some of these division leads right now, and thankfully, like Atlanta and Philly they can't lose. So Philly's trying to make the surge, and Atlanta's like, yeah, no, you're not going to do that. And so the NL East may stay a little more competitive, but it seems like 3 divisions are already pretty much done.
Yeah, and on top of like the possibility of teams going to a 6-man rotation or being pulled early, there's always the possibility of those phantom IL stints in the middle of the season just to keep those innings down and give them some time in the summertime to get things smoothed out, as we see with some specific teams unofficially doing that on a regular basis, like the Dodgers. I can see the Yankees doing that with the aforementioned Cortez and Montgomery, just to give them some time off without pulling them early in the game or something like that, unless they want to go that route as well.
Mm-hmm.
Jake, we talk about all these greater trends that we're paying attention to, especially the ones that Jason's pointing out. But when you are making your decisions on how to place your FAAB bids or who to drop or adjusting your roster in season, like, how actionable do you find these greater trends, especially with the non-transparency of what the ball is like, just the coaching changes that we're seeing across baseball already? June hasn't even flipped the calendar yet. How actionable are these on a grander scale for in your experience?
Yeah, I think they're definitely, like, you have to pay attention to them. I think even if you start off the season really successful, you can't just sit back and ride that through, because it's likely your team is overachieving for the first month if you're consistently like first across the board. And so you need to be adaptable and be ready for those dips. And if the league is trending one way and you don't hop on that train early enough, all of a sudden you're in the dust. So it's something to keep up with, but usually not something that I'll change an entire roster for. But I guess, for example, this year in that WARF league, I was in like 13th, and I was like top 3 in batting average, top 3 in steals, dead last in runs, dead last in home runs. And you get the league-wide batting average in the first month and a half. It was atrocious. Oh, sorry. Yeah, league-wide batting average in the first month and a half.
232 at some point. And yeah.
So all of a sudden you're talking about picking up a guy with 25 home run power who hits 240. That'll play. That'll do it. And so you pivot to those guys. For me, like, I picked up Edwin Rios. Even like Santiago Espinal was like a an all-right power guy who actually has been contributing great in batting average. But you could transition to attack those areas where not only you're doing well in, but like the league itself was doing horrible. So you can pivot that way. Like also Jason mentioned, in that first part of the year, relievers were getting so many wins. There was a couple of weeks where I ran out 5-6 relievers to get ratios down and got just as many wins. So you can take advantage of those things as they happen if you're proactive with paying attention to that. But yeah, it's a case by case. It's what are your strengths and does that play with what's happening overall? So yeah, you don't ever want to put too much stock in it, like you said, with the ball. I don't think it was smart to like all of a sudden drop like the fly ball hitters and go for line drive hitters, because as we've seen, it's evened out more. So yeah, so that's kind of where we're at.
Even Joey Gallo's hitting them. I wrote an article 2 weeks ago and I was getting comments. What do I do with, as I was writing the article, Marcus Semien like hit his first home run and then he has 7 or 8. And I was getting comments like, do I drop Joey Gallo? I'm like, no, don't. And I have Gallo in 3 different leagues because I felt that he was at a discount, I was willing to try it, and I was happy with his price this draft season, so I took him, and then I have him in my lineup. He's had a nice week. Now he's not playing every day, but he's getting the home runs. We'll see what happens out of it with that, but it's like really tough for some of these guys that were just not performing. Unless they're seriously hurt, eventually they're going to perform. And I know it's really hard to carry some of these guys and look at it and say, oh my God, come on already. But then the worst thing that could ever happen. I even had somebody ask me about, should I cut Teoscar Hernandez? I'm like, oh my God, no. Please don't do that. So it's just the worst thing you could do is run out of frustration and cut somebody and then watch somebody else pick them up and it gets rolling on somebody else's team after you've soaked up all the crap. So yeah, you just gotta, you can't react. You do, once we saw stuff happening and getting better with the baseball, it's okay. Who are these guys that were struggling? Now we're still not seeing the opposite field home run. So but it also allows you to adjust your projections. Like a lot of people were super high on Bo Bichette this year. Bo Bichette had 12, 15 opposite field, the center, the right field home runs last year. A lot of that came in the minor league parks too. So you got to adjust those types of things and look at it from a different lens. And we're deep enough into the season where you can't be stubborn and be like, oh, it's all going to work itself out. Don't worry about it. We're a third of the way into the season. This is the new market. Get used to it.
Yeah, if you're not making those adjustments by now, you're probably falling too far behind to make the adjustments later on in the summer. All right, I think it's really important that obviously you're keeping track of those trends and you're adjusting your rosters accordingly without overcompensating, as we're talking about. So something to just keep an eye on. Make sure you're taking a look at Jason's articles over at RotoWire and just doing your own research, of course, and finding out exactly what it is that you need on your rosters, because not every roster was built the same way. So for now, though, let's go into this week's recommendations on how everybody can adjust their rosters by picking up the right player in FAAB to gain the edge in whatever category that they might need to be focusing on this week. So as we do, we'll go category by category or groupings of categories, starting with our hitters. And Jason, I'm going to start with you here as our special guest. We're going to start with our power categories, home runs, RBIs, so our power hitters. Is there a guy out there on the wire, regardless of league size, that would probably be available that could pop a couple of home runs this week for anybody in need?
All right. With me, and what I did is I looked at my RotoWire OC, looked for free agents in a 12-team mixed league for all of these selections. So I'm going with Franchy Cordero from Boston. Always been a big fan of what Cordero's been able to do. You look at the upcoming schedule this week, he's got 3 games with Oakland, 3 games with the Cardinals, all at home. Next week it's the Tigers. And then he closes up the month with the Guardians and the Blue Jays. So I like the schedule. I've always believed in the ability, and Boston's hitting for the most part. I know they had some issues in the Angels series, but they still won 2 or 3 in the Angels series, and their offense has been better of late. So give me Franchy Cordero for this.
Nice. Franchy was a pickup of mine last week under the radar. It was like the last possible second as I was going through them. I'm like, I didn't realize I needed this. And as a Red Sox fan, I started realizing, that's right, Franchy's actually playing every day, which is nuts when you really think about it. But I like the call out there as well. Jake, who you got?
Yeah, we talked about him a little bit earlier, but my guy's Jake Berger. His story is fantastic. He was drafted 11th overall and then tore his Achilles twice. So now he's finally back and he's finally getting the chance to play every day and produce. And so on May 29th, Berger hit third for the first time in the order. Before that, in his starts, he averaged 7th. Since then, he's averaged 5th. And in those 9 games where he started, since that start in third, he's hit 314, 9 runs, 6 RBIs, 2 homers, which does include a pinch hit homer as well. And in that time, he has a 24.1% barrel rate, which is the 4th highest in baseball. That's about 2 weeks. And he's absolutely torn the cover off the ball. So that's been really good to see once he's gotten that opportunity in the middle of the order for him to really break out in the power department. And it's like we mentioned earlier, the White Sox lineup needs that production. And it's not the same lineup that we're used to, but he's still hitting in that marquee spot for RBIs. And also something I noticed as well was his K rate on the year is 29%, which isn't something to write home about. But if you look at his rolling chart, you see that number just plummet. And right now, it's actually the first time it's dropped under league average in 50 plate appearance samples. And he's on the up, and really looking forward to see what he can do. He's still young, even though he missed all that time, and it's really exciting to see him really step into his own.
Yeah, it seems like we mentioned earlier, he's going to be one of the beneficiaries of that shorter bench that La Russa has to work with right now in Chicago. Should get that consistent. Even if he doesn't start a game, totally see him being the first man off the bench in a pinch hit situation. So you might still get an extra at bat, even if he doesn't start the game that you start him in your weekly leagues. All right, let's get some speed guys on the books from you guys. Some guys might add some stolen bases. Doesn't have to be stolen bases. Could just be runs. Could be guys at the top of the order that can score a couple extra runs. Jake, I'm going to stick with you here to start us off. Who do you have your eye on that can fill these categories?
Yeah, so stolen bases are tough right now, but I went and looked at who's been running more recently, and the name that stood out was Nico Hoerner for the Cubs. He has 4 stolen bases in the last 2 weeks, and also during that time he has a 340 on-base percentage, which is much better than it was before. His K percentage has also plummeted over those couple weeks. He's widely owned in 15-team leagues, but you should be able to get him in Yahoo leagues in general and 12-teamers as well. So if you need that extra speed, and he could probably help you out in batting average, or if it's an on-base league right now, I'd say run with his hot hand. But yeah, it's tough pickings out there when you're looking for steals. You got to compromise on something else. And at least Hoerner right now, like I said, get you that other category.
Yeah, and when I like to mention this on most episodes as names pop up, been given the opportunity to run, or at least he's got the green light for sure. He's got over 16% of his opportunities he's had to steal. He's been given the opportunity to actually to run, and he's been successful 86% of the time. So above that fictional 75% marker that you like to see out of your base runners, if you get below that 75% marker, you start seeing a yellow light, and sooner or later you end up getting that red light. But 86% is still successful enough where I would assume that he's going to continue to get that green light, especially with the recent success that you mentioned as well. Good call out there. Jason, any other speedsters out there that you might have your eye on for this week's FAAB?
John Berti's going to get a lot of attention on this week's FAAB. He's available in my 12-team OC. Berti's got 7 steals already in June. He's outrunning most of the league. He has as many or more steals than 25 teams this month. He's got a 392 OBP. He's now 11 of 12 in stolen bases in the season. He has a neon flashing green light when he's on base, and he's on base a bunch. So this is what Berti does. And so he's going to get a lot of attention. And you got to ride the hot streak if you need the steals. He's got half the Marlin steals on his own. But like I said, he's outrun 25 teams in the league by himself. Go get it until he flops out with it. But yeah, that's where my attention is going to be. I need steals, and I'm going to be aggressive. I've got the second highest FAAB total in my league. I need steals. I'll be bidding on Berti.
Yeah, 1 out of every 4 times he's on base with the base open in front of him, he takes off. So odds are, all he's got to do is get on base first. That's always the key for John Berti.
He's the anti Andrew Benintendi. Benintendi's on base just as often, but Benintendi was 8 of 17 for steals last year, and Mike Matheny has put an anchor around his ankle. Yeah. I don't think he's even attempted a stolen base this year, and he's been on base a ton. So, yeah.
In Kansas City,
Team Berti
runs. And so if Matheny's going to put an anchor on you, you're doing something wrong in Kansas City. All right, let's move on to some guys that could have a good opportunity in front of them, good matchups, lots of playing time, et cetera, et cetera. There's a couple schedule notes to go over to consider as you are making your bids. There are 6 teams, only 6 teams have a 7-game work week ahead of them. Excuse me, not 6 teams. There are more than 6 teams, but only 6 have just 6. That's Baltimore, Toronto, Detroit, Texas, and the Chicago Cubs and San Diego all have a regular 7-game work week, but then we have a couple of double headers in there as well. So you have the Angels and you have Pittsburgh and St. Louis with a scheduled day off, but they do have a doubleheader, so they still have 7 games. And then on top of that, Seattle, Philadelphia, and Washington have a 7-day work week, but also a doubleheader, so they've got 8 games ahead. So lots of opportunities for extra at-bats, maybe even some extra innings, depending on what pitchers you're looking at there. So keep an eye on those schedules. Colorado, as I usually point out, where they'll be playing, they will be back at Coors all week, 6 games in Coors, hosting the Guardians for 3 to start the week, and then hosting the Padres over the weekend. The Dodgers are the only team with 2 scheduled days off next week, as I alluded to earlier in the podcast. So something to consider there, especially in the first half of your NFBC weekly lineup changes. So with all that in mind and whatever other information you guys want to throw out there, Jason, I'm going to start with you. You got anybody out there that could be taking advantage of the schedule that they have next week based on matchups or whatever?
To me, I would look at the Astros, and I'm being specific with Kyle Tucker, Jeremy Pena, and Jose Altuve, because they have the Rangers coming up this week, and the Rangers cannot throw anybody out in the bases. We talked about it earlier, and this is what I wanted to mention, where, again, the league average, the stolen base success rate is 75%. The Rangers are the worst team in baseball. 89% of the stolen bases against them are successful. Sam Huff, as well as he's hitting, is not throwing anybody out. So, they put Huff behind the plate back there, and Jonah Heim's not throwing much out either. I'm looking for, if you're needing steals, these guys are in your lineup already, but you should, I should get some good steals this week, because teams are running on the Rangers, as they should, because they're not throwing anybody out.
Yeah, definitely something to be watching, and not just how talented your stolen base guys are on the base pass, but who they are facing, whether it's the catcher or the pitchers, as Jason alluded to earlier with Tampa Bay, pitchers that take a little bit longer to get the ball to the plate. They don't do their catchers any favors by giving them less time to throw them out at second base or third base, for that matter. So definitely something to keep an eye on for those matchups as well. Jake, anybody else out there that you like to take advantage of the matchups that they see next week?
So this one's actually a little less matchup related, but more just about opportunity in the lineup. And Lane Thomas is who we'll talk about here. He was a bit of a darling in the offseason and the draft season. He was a really popular sleeper pick, but he came out and he just didn't hit at the top of the order. He struggled for a while, but those who hung tough and waited it out are starting to get rewarded. On May 23rd, he hit leadoff for the first time in about a month. For the rest of May, he was about 50-50, top of the lineup, bottom of the lineup. And then every game in June, he's been either in first or second in the lineup. And in those 12 games where he's been hitting first or second since May 23rd, he's hitting 300 with a 364 on-base percentage. He scored 15 runs in those 12 games with 7 RBI, 4 homers, 3 of them, albeit in one game, and then no steals. So he has been taking advantage of the opportunity that's been given to him. And he's hitting ahead of Juan Soto and Josh Bell, a really great middle of the order there. And so he's definitely going to continue to see success. If he can stay up there, that's going to be great. And he hasn't contributed steals because he wasn't great at it last year. He does have that fantastic sprint speed, but he only went 6 out of 9 last year with what you were just talking about. He's gotten that, I'd say, that red light. So you never know. It could be something he works on and does eventually, but I wouldn't count on it for now. But those runs and that on-base potential right there is fantastic looking at it.
Yeah, he's attempted less than 2% of his opportunities given on the base pass. So I would agree that he has a pretty dark red light, if not at least, a shade of pink at least on the base pass. But with being rostered only in 22% of online championships, he is readily available in most 12-teamers, 96% rostered across main events. So those 15-teamers, a little bit more on tune, whether he was draft darling and people just can't quit him and they don't want to drop him, or people have already become a little bit more wise to what he's been doing. Those deeper leagues, he's always check. Like we always say, always check your wire. You never know if he's available or not, but more readily available, of course, in the 12-teamers as of right now. Let's move on to our pitcher section here. We will look a little further ahead into our future to-start pitchers. I got a list of pitchers here for you guys to consider that could or should be lined up for 2 starts, not this coming week, but the week after. So you might want to FAAB them this week, stash them for their start this week. You might want to start them for their start this week, depending on what you think of their matchup. But really, you're FAABing them this week to stash them at a cheaper price in FAAB to get that 2 start the following week. So, Jake, I'll start with you here. So what I want you to do is look through this list, and it's a decent-sized list. I'm not going to go through everybody. The list here, though, is pitchers that are rostered on 50% or less Yahoo leagues right now at the time of this recording. And the listing of the teams that they're playing are the first team listed, of course, is who they'll be playing next week, who they're lined up to pitch against next week. And then the second 2 is their 2-start potential. So give me at least one name here that you'd be really focusing on for that 2-start. And then give me a name here do you think would be a popular ad that you're probably just out on for one reason or another.
Yeah, so I think first I'll go with a guy who's probably the definition of, as Nick Pollock would say, a Toby, and that's Kyle Gibson. His start's coming up this week. He's got Miami this week, and then his 2-step is going to be at Texas and at San Diego. And he's got a 4.41 ERA, but his FIP looks all right. It's a 3.64. XFIP is right there, 3.62, 13.6 K- walk rate, which it's not great, but it's serviceable. And those matchups are pretty solid, especially that one against Texas. I'd definitely be all right with playing him against Miami as well. The Phillies are playing so much better recently, and so he's probably got a better chance now than he even did before taking a win. At least one in those 3 starts, I hope 2. So I think he would be my first choice there. Also, he's a 54.5% ground ball rate on the year, which is one of the best numbers in the league and right at that kind of like that 55% threshold there. So I think he's a pretty solid bet. The other one I'd probably look at, be a little less sure of though, is Reid Detmers. 100% sitting him this week against the Dodgers in LA. That's a losing situation. But the week after that, he is Kansas City and Seattle at home, which is much better for matchups. He did just throw 8.2 innings pitched combined against the Yankees and the Red Sox. Didn't give up any runs, but had a 1.5 whip. And I think that it's a solid option if you're looking for some ratios. He's not going to get you strikeouts. I think in those 2 starts, he had 5 strikeouts. But yeah, he's someone who's outperforming the underlying metrics a little bit this year. And obviously that no-hitter was out of nowhere. But if you're looking at just the matchups, that KC and Seattle 2-step looks really appetizing.
And if you told me Reid Detmer was not going to get you strikeouts a year and a half ago, after he's putting up the K per 9 and that K percentage in the minors, I don't know what I would think. But the fact that you're not seeing these strikeouts now after seeing that big burst of strikeouts in the upper minors is very disappointing, to say the least. Jason, same question. Give me a guy on here that you really like. Hopefully it's not one of the guys that Jake talked about, or maybe you could just double down. And then somebody you think you'd be fading that the market would be going after.
I don't know. It's almost like none of the above. The only guy that really got my attention off this list was David Peterson. But even the Mets aren't sure when he's going to pitch next. I saw a tweet from Mike Puma earlier. They're like, we don't know exactly when he's going to pitch next. So they're not fully committed to him. So even if you get him this week, and he's got, as you list here, he's got Milwaukee certainly not hitting right now. And then so next week he could line up and have a nice 2-step with the Marlins twice. But if they decide, you know what, we're going to put him in the bullpen, then But honestly, none of this gives me any kind of excitement. It's like you look at Brubaker this week against the Cardinals, no thanks. Cubs and Rays, he's got a chance of doing something there, but Brubaker still hasn't won a game. He's 0-6. Same thing with Kaprelian. He's had his moments. You don't want to use him against Boston this week, but Seattle and Kansas City next week, that's nice. Maybe he can finally get his first win. So it's yuck. I think this resonates with what Jeff Zimmerman said. He was doing FAAB. He tweeted something out this morning. He goes, I hope you guys get your pitchers, so it may be time to just start streaming relievers instead of picking up guys. And I was like, yeah, I got to replace my pocket aces of Woodruff and Bueller, and I may be good looking at this list right here. I'm like, I think I'm going to go fish in the middle relief and see what I can find.
Yeah, there's gonna be players. If you don't look at the name, you just look at the matchup. Dylan Bundy's matchups against hosting Cleveland and hosting Colorado is that alone. You're like, okay, fine, but then you see it's Dylan Bundy, and you're like, obviously, I have to start questioning my life decisions. And Alex Fado, I'm a big fan of, but of course, going into Fenway and then even going into Arizona at this rate, Arizona's not doing that poorly as we thought they might at the start of the season. The matchups are almost the only thing you have to hold on to, just because I agree. I saw Jeff's. I was hoping somebody would bring it up because I saw Jeff's tweet earlier, and he's right. There's nothing, and of course, this list that I put together, a good chunk of these guys are not even going to be available on your wire, and I'm just basing this on a 50% roster rate on Yahoo. Very different on NFBC, but we got to talk about somebody. So I got to throw. I had to throw a list together, right? All right, let's go a little bit more short term then. Jason, I'll start with you, and we'll go with who can get you some wins and Ks this week, not even looking too far ahead.
When I looked at, I don't even know. I was trying to think of ratios, but wins and Ks looking too far ahead, I don't know. It's ugly out there. It truly is. It's just ugly. And this may be the time just to go after relievers. Somebody like Jalen Beeks with the Rays, he's getting a lot of strikeouts out of that middle relief role, and they play a lot of tight and close games. So for me, honestly, not even playing homer, give me Jalen Beeks over everybody on this list.
Yeah, we talked about this before Strider was in the rotation, when Michael King was really putting something together in New York. It really depends on where they land on the weekend. And if they don't pitch on the weekend, and you can almost guarantee that they're going to get two to three innings on Monday, you can probably assume that they're going to basically get a double start out of those types of guys, which would be the equivalent of an ace pitching, your Brandon Woodward replacement, if you will. But you've got to time that, and you have to wait until Sunday, like right before FAAB is bidding, to know where Jake, is there anybody out there that you've noticed that may be available to get us wins and Ks this coming week?
Yeah, may be available is the key there for this guy. So I want to talk about Hunter Greene for a minute. And he's 98% owned in both the main event and the online championships. So he's more likely stashed on someone's bench. Maybe he's stashed on a bench in some draft champions leagues. But if he is, it's about time to get him off that bench. And then if you're in a Yahoo league, he's available in 49% of leagues right now. Definitely someone to go after, because if you remember the start of the year when he just got blown up initially, his walk rate was off the charts. And that was always the big concern with him, is that his stuff was incredible. Fastball's electric, but the command wasn't great. He was leaving that fastball over the middle of the plate. It was getting hit hard, tons of walks. And even that velocity, once it hit, if he made it to the fifth or the sixth inning, it would fall off. But now he's really fixed, I think, a lot of that. Because if you look at his last four starts, he has a 32.2% K rate, of course, and a 4.6% walk rate. Compare that to his previous 7 starts, he had a 13.5% walk rate. So now you're looking at that 27.6% strikeout minus walk rate, 6th in MLB, and over that time span since about May 20th, those 4 starts. So if you're stashing him, now's the time to play him. His schedule is pretty tough. He's playing at home against Milwaukee and the Dodgers, which those Dodgers are in Cincinnati about as tough as you can get. But you look at that stuff, and if he can continue lowering that K rate or just keeping it at around 5, that'll play in just about any league. So really excited to see him finally harness that incredible talent that he has. So yeah, if you're stashing him on your bench, definitely bring him up. And if he's available in one of those Yahoo leagues, I'd definitely be aggressive on him.
He certainly looked good against St. Louis. My friend Craig was like, how does this guy not throw a changeup? I don't know. It's just, to me, that's where I'm always wondering why these guys struggle to throw the off speed. And it could be really nasty pitch for him if he had the ability to do that, but some guys just don't. But he'll need one eventually, and maybe he comes up with a split or something to get the off speed. But he looked really good in the couple innings I watched him pitch over yesterday.
Yeah, and one more thing to add to that. I saw a tweet from Codify during that start against St. Louis, and it's at Codify Baseball. And Hunter Greene's average fastball velocity in the first, second, and third innings of that start was 98. And in the fourth, fifth, and sixth innings, it was 99.7. So he actually got stronger as the game went on, which is a sight for sore eyes considering he was having those velo issues in the beginning. I'm sure it was just like pretty much everyone else getting ramped up after the short start. But now you can put those concerns to bed as well with him.
Yeah, it's nice to see. And it just goes to show, too, just because you might be in that one, you might be in that league where he was dropped. Like you mentioned, he's 98% rostered in those, and I think in the main event in online championships, you might be in that one where he's available. So double check and don't question yourself. Like, why was he dropped? There must be some reason. No, just think about who he is and what he's been doing. And I think that should go a long way. So I think in that one league, I'd be curious to see what he ends up going for in FAAB this Sunday night. All right, let's go into those ratios that Jason was talking about earlier. Your ERA, your WHIP, and your standard leagues. Jake, I will start with you again here. And typically the section gets filled with middle relievers, but it could just be soft tossing guy who's not going to get strikeouts, but can still has a lot of control as a starter. But who are you going with here to cut into those ratios?
Yeah, we're going from a guy who's widely owned, widely rostered, to someone who is widely available, and that's Andre Pallante. He was a middle reliever for the Cardinals for pretty much the whole year, but he's been being ramped up. In his last 3 appearances, he's thrown 53 pitches, then 64, then 78. In that 78 pitch outing, he went 5.1 innings. So that's really great to see that they're starting to stretch him out. The Cardinals are desperate for pitching right now, which is really ironic to me because I think for the longest time they were that team that had all the pitching and their offense was just atrocious, and then they finally flipped it, and now they can't keep people healthy. And Michaelis has been great, but he's really old. So Andre Pallante I think is going to be good, especially since this week he has a start against Pittsburgh. He should line up for that last game of the Pittsburgh series, and I think he's got a great chance of snatching a win there. He's not going to get you a lot of strikeouts. He only has a 16.2% strikeout rate, and he's been outperforming his metrics a little bit. He has a 1.04 ERA, but a 3.52 FIP, which is still a solid pitcher, right? Like, especially against the Pirates. If you need some solid ratios and a solid chance at a win, I think that's a great place to look because he is 0% owned in the main event and 1% owned in the online championships. That's definitely someone to take a look at.
I'm sorry, Jake. I'm still really held on to this notion that Miles Mikolas, who's 33 years old, is very old, as I'm getting closer and closer to my 40th later on this year. So I don't know what you're talking about. So just leave it at that.
Yeah, and this dinosaur here is turning 50 this year. And so if Michaelis is old at 33, I can only imagine what I am at 49. Wow.
Hey, if it makes y'all feel any better, I know the audience can't see me, but I am fully bald and I am 20. Oh man, I'm 23, 24.
And your memory is going already. Yeah.
So yeah, it evens out, man. It evens out.
There you go. All right, fine. We'll take it. Jason, who are you looking at to cut into some ratios this week?
So it's like when I was looking at relievers this week as trying to replace all these starters, Miguel Castro is somebody that I keep looking at just because his stuff is so nasty. And I know that sometimes he will pitch his way out of the strike zone, but he is striking out a bunch of dudes here in June. He's got a 33% strikeout rate. He's got 25% strikeout minus walk rate. So I know there's risk with him, but he pitches for a team that wins a bunch of games. And he's got the opportunities to, look at the schedule this week. He's got the Rays that have a lot of swing and miss in it. So he's got some opportunities to do something. And he's in that bucket of players that I'm looking at that I know I can get cheap and potentially steal a win here, get a couple of shutdown innings and have some nice ratios there. And he's going to work. He'll work a full frame, possibly even a second one. But he's been pitching well overall. And that's where I'm leading at this week as far as possibilities. Again, it's a good place for him to be because he's in those opportunities where he can put up some damage.
All right, and then we will move on to everybody's favorite category in general, that's saves. Jason, I'm going to stick with you on this one. Go right back. Keep in the relievers section. Who's your strongest play for saves going into, I think this is week 10?
Yeah. I mentioned Poche because somebody's got to pick up the ball in Tampa Bay, and I believe he's the best shot at it. The Yankees series is obviously a rough one, but then they got Baltimore coming off that. So there should be some opportunities for him moving forward there. So that's where that's my one. I don't even have an A1B. That's my one AA play. But then I believe Jason Adams is still going to be in the fringe there as well because of his ability to throw 3 different pitches. He came up as a starting pitcher, and so he's got the ability to handle righties and lefties. Poche does as well, and Poche has got – I've been more impressed this year with his breaking ball. It used to be a pure chase pitch for him, because he would throw the fastball so stinking much, but now he's throwing the breaking ball for strikes, and he's using it as more than just 2 strike counts. So that would be my aggressive play. But if I get outbid, like if you're doing your conditional bids, your waterfall bids, do an Adam below Poche. So if somebody goes all in on Poche, you get the other option, and it could work out for you.
Yeah, you stole my advice right there. That was perfect. The conditional bids are extremely important, especially when you have multiple options at the same position that you're going for. Make sure that you're getting all those in there. You're not just putting everything you got into one. It can also help keep your prices down, of course, especially as the season wanes on and you have less and less FAAB each and every week. Jake, you got any strategic save plays here going into next week?
Yes, sir. A pretty recent development, actually. So today, when Corey Knebel was warming up, he experienced shoulder tightness. So right now he's listed as day-to-day, and the Phillies are going into a week where they have 8 games because of a doubleheader. So there's going to be some opportunities there. And right now I think the prime guy to step into that role and at least get 1, maybe 2, this week would be Seranthony Dominguez. He's 81% owned in the main event, 21% owned in the – sorry, let me do that again. He's 81% rostered in the main event, and 21% rostered in the online championship, and 7% on Yahoo. So I think he's been fantastic. His ratios have been incredible, and he's been that go-to setup guy for them. And now hopefully he'll get a chance to step into that closing role with, sadly, I'm sorry, Jason, Cable going down. That really hurts, but definitely creates that opportunity there with so many games this week for the Phillies.
And obviously, Seranthony having the experience before his major injury a couple years ago, closing out games and being pretty good at it overall, especially in the strikeout department. I'm sure as he was starting to be talked about, as Knebel was having his troubles last week, he'll be a pretty popular ad for the exact reasons you mentioned. So make sure he is in your conditional bids if you're looking for extra saves this week as well. All right, and then our final section here, just an opportunity for you guys to throw up pretty much anybody that maybe they didn't fit into any of the categories we talked about. You're interested in stashing on another prospect that is available. Of course, in NFBC, they have to have made their debut or have been drafted and dropped to be available. But in your faster finger leagues, in your Yahoo CBSs, you have different rules, I'm sure. Or it could be an IL stash, what have you. Jake, I'll start with you here. Not to put you on the spot, but you didn't put anybody on this list, so I'm very curious to see who you threw out here without giving me a heads up.
My apologies. Serious apologies. I was not scrambling, but I was really going through the list here. And so I recently did a midseason dynasty startup with 50-man rosters with Ryan Venancio as the commissioner and with a bunch of guys on Twitter. And when going through, once you get into around 40 and up, you're really digging through the dirt. And what I found was someone who I had forgotten about, Jake Meyers. If you remember, he was coming up with the Astros in 2021, and he ended up getting injured in that playoff game against the White Sox where he dove into the wall. And he's in a AAA rehab assignment right now. I mean, he's doing all right, but if you look at those numbers in 2021 when he got the opportunity to play, he had a 10.1% barrel rate with 99 batted balls, which I think is definitely something to look at. He's really young. He's 23, 24. He also had a 111 mile per hour max exit velocity, which is, Sarah says, that kind of, it's been shown that once you hit 111 and above, you see that bump in projections. So it's nice to see that he's hit that early in his career. The one thing he can improve on is the K rate. It's at it was at 30.7 last year, and then with 6.1 walk rate. He also had an above average exit velocity with a hard hit rate, and he's fast. He's an absolute burner. So as he comes up, if he gets that job back from Chas McCormick and can find himself in the outfield and play himself into an everyday role, he's someone that can give you some stolen bases, maybe some sneaky power. Keep an eye on him because you can get him for dirt cheap right now if you want to wait. I don't blame you at all because we don't know what is going to happen since he's been out for a while, but definitely someone to keep an eye on, especially a dynasty league since he's young and he's shown that raw ability.
I can only assume that you did this on purpose, but I love the fact that you picked 2 guys named Jake to bookend all of your recommendations on this, with Jake Berger to start and Jake Meyers to end it off. So that is a good way to end your recommendations here. So we'll move on to Jason. Jason, you got anybody named Jason in your wild card, or you got somebody else?
Yeah, no, I already used Jason Adam. We did that. But no, it's like there's 2 things I'd mention here. Long-term play, Bobby Dahlbeck's starting to hit again. He's finally got his average up over 200, and he started way down. It was about this time last year that he took off and had a super hot summer. And I'm not giving up on him. And the power is ridiculous. We know that. And he's a very streaky hitter. But in short-term play, if you wanted to get short-term, Ji-Man Choi is owned in 5% of OCs. They have a lot of righties this week. He hits these really well. On the season, he's got like a 360 OVP, a 280 average. He's been producing. So if you need to plug a hole at first base on the short term, that's where I go. But Dahlbeck is the type of guys we were talking earlier, as the ball's starting to get back to something we recognize. He's the type of guy that could just get on one of those 15 home run heaters over a 4 to 6 week period and make a difference for you in a category. So that's the wild card that I'm throwing back out there.
All right. Those are all great names to consider as you guys are making your bids. As you are going into your bidding, I implore you guys to, as we get further and further into the season, making your drops should be that much easier to do. As you realize where the FAAB is landing with the rest of the competitors in each of your leagues, realizing how much money everybody else has to play with should make those decisions a little bit easier to make, especially if you haven't spent all of your money. You can always get the guys back that you drop if they all of a sudden they go off and you just feel like you made the wrong decision, or if you want to get them back a little bit earlier off their IL stints or something like that. So don't be stingy with your drops. And as you need to make these adjustments, as we talked about earlier in the season, something to consider as you're making those decisions, and you have to make those adjustments or you're going to be stuck in the middle of the pack. That's not, you either win your league or you don't. It's simple as that in most situations. Of course, there's a lot of people who are trying to cash in the top three, but if you're stuck in that 6, 7, 8 spot, even in a 12-team league, it's a lot harder to move out if you're not making those adjustments that are necessary. So make those tough decisions when necessary. And Jason, that's going to do it for us. But man, thanks so much for joining us this week. Could you take a moment to remind everybody what you do and what you do, where you do it?
Yeah, on Twitter at Jason Collette, one long word. And otherwise you get a Canadian musician or an equestrian, somebody in Australia. It's weird what comes through. Collette Calls column hits early in the week at RotoWire. If you don't subscribe to RotoWire, I think rotowire.com/radio or /free gets you 10 free day trial without a credit card. So you can go check that out. And then Sleeper in the Bust on Sundays. So we'll be recording tomorrow. I don't know if we're doing Father's Day. So it's been like every other week due to some, like last week I was in Durham with my son, so didn't record. But we're definitely recording tomorrow. Father's Day is to be determined. But that's where we usually go over to start pitchers, free agent stuff as well to help people prepare for FAAB.
That is amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time, man. And Jake, I'm going to let you do the same thing, man. I want you to remind everybody what else that you do over at Pitcher List, anything else that you're working on that they should be keeping an eye out for.
Yeah. So Pitcher List, I'm doing the newsletter every Wednesday, which is just a really short, simple, some paragraphs about baseball. I try to bring in some stats, check out some trends that I'll see. And so it's also like you should be getting the Pitcher List newsletter every day as is, but on Wednesdays, look for me to spit some words out there on the page. And that's the reoccurring thing I'm doing. I'm a rookie. I just joined Pitcher List 2 months ago probably. And so I'm working my way into a regular rotation. And that's been the thing that's been keeping me honest and up to date with everything. So yeah, that's the biggest thing. And on Twitter at Jake Maish, Maish. And yeah, up and up from there. And we'll see how it goes.
Nice. Make sure you're keeping out for that and everything else. And Jake's also going to be doing the FAAB written article, the complimentary article to this podcast. So check for that. It comes out every Sunday afternoon by Kevin Hasting. Kevin, of course, still traveling in Hawaii, getting himself settled, as difficult as that might be over there. But that's going to wrap it up for episode 63 of On the Wire. Please make sure to subscribe, share, review the podcast wherever you're listening. We will be back every Sunday with a detailed FAAB breakdown throughout the 2022 season. And, of course, keep a lookout for Jake's companion article over at Pitcher List. It comes out Sunday afternoon. You can follow myself on the Twitter at @ADGrade. That's all spelled out. Jake is at Jake Maish, as he explained. You can look for a link for that in the show description as well. Kevin will be back with us next week. You can still follow him at Hasting Kevin in the meantime. And, of course, follow the pod itself at On the Wire Pod. I'd like to once again thank our special guest, Jason Collette, for joining us. Follow him at Jason Collette. I am Adam Howe, and on behalf of Jake, Kevin, and Jason, thanks for listening. And with that, we bid you goodbye.